Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and it's that time of the year again. It is set review time. Oath of the Gatewatch is coming. Next weekend we will all be playing pre-releases. The week after we will all be drafting and opening packs and playing with the newest set. And that means it's time to go through every single card in the set. And as always, we are going to start with the white cards. Now up first, I have 3 disclaimers. If you've watched my videos before, you know what those disclaimers are. But for those who don't, and those who need a reminder, number 1, I get comments about this every single set review. This is a limited set review. I am talking primarily about draft, to a lesser extent about sealed. I may make reference to various constructed formats, but my ratings, my comments, my everything is focused on limited, not on constructed. Disclaimer number 2, I have not played with these cards. I have not proxied them out. I have not test drafted or anything like that. So I'm sort of rating them in a vacuum to an extent. Obviously, we know that we have a pack of Battle for Zendikar included in our draft, so I can make some somewhat informed decisions on how the format maybe will work out, but I've not played these cards. I don't know what archetypes are going to be better than others. I don't know if one color is going to be completely unplayable again. Who knows? I have not played with these cards, so this is sort of my first glance opinion on how these cards play. These are how I'm going to draft and play with these cards for the first week or two, until I find out, if I was right or wrong about some of the cards. And thirdly, I can be right and wrong about cards. These are my opinions. These are my feelings on these cards. They will be slightly influenced by my various biases towards colors or archetypes or playstyles or things like that. I am not purporting to be the best Magic player out there. I think I'm a decent enough Magic player, but I definitely am not going to hold my opinions as being the gospel truth. So I definitely want to hear your opinions. If you disagree with me, let me know. If you agree with me, let me know. Keep it civil, please. I would prefer that. But the comment sections is always down there for you to interact with me and interact with each other to discuss the newest cards. But without further delay, we're going to start the set review. We're going to start with a spicy one. We're going to start with a white Eldrazi creature. This is a first for this block. Eldrazi Displacers, 2 and a white for a creature Eldrazi at rare. It's a 3/3. It has Devoid, of course. And for 2 and a colorless, you can exile another target creature, then return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. The diamond represents colorless mana. Most of you have probably heard this, but I'll do a slight aside here. Colorless mana is now a 6th color of mana. There are lands that produce colorless mana. There always have been. There's no difference in how they work. They produce the exact same thing they've always produced, except now it's a diamond instead of being a 2 or a 1 or whatever. Now, however, and for the foreseeable future or / forever, some cards will say that they require colorless mana for their abilities or their casting costs. Therefore, you must have a colorless mana source. So to activate Eldrazi Displacer's ability, you must have a colorless mana source. A Scion will make you a diamond. A Blighted Step from the last set will make you a mana. A Kozilek's Channeler will make you diamond, so it'll make you 2 colorless mana to activate this ability. That's the colorless mana change with Oath of the Gatewatch. It's not a huge one, so don't get too confused by it. If you don't understand it, definitely look into it because it really is simple, and ignore anything that was discussed before the mechanic came out. There was a lot of confusion about how this worked because people were trying to speculate on it. It's very simple, should be straightforward. Anyways, this card is insane. This card is so insane. This is one of my cards that I super want to open and play with. Repeatable Flicker is just incredible. Repeatable on-demand flicker. You can load up on enter the battlefield effects on your side and just go off with them. Flicker, Siege Rhino is what comes to mind, obviously, because of standard. But Flicker is something that does something when it enters the battlefield, and you're just going to repeat that effect over and over and over. You can have invincible blockers, because you can block with something and then flicker it, and it lives, and the other creature stays blocked, so that's fantastic. Your creatures have hexproof on demand. Say they get targeted by a Touch of the Void. Flicker it. Touch of the Void is countered. It kills your opponent's tokens. You can just flicker their tokens away and they're dead. It even functions as an expensive tapper because when the creature returns to the battlefield, it's tapped. So say my opponent has a creature that I don't want to be attacked by. I can flicker it. It enters tapped. And now it can't attack. It's a slightly expensive tapper because it's 3 mana. We're used to preferably one, or in the olden days, just tapping the creature. But yeah, this thing is just insane. I think it's a total first pick windmill slam. I'm so excited for this card. Very happy to start off this set review with an A+. So happy with this card. Next up, we take a little bit of a fall. We go to Afa Protector. This is 2 and a white for a creature human soldier ally at common. It's a 1/4, and it has vigilance. And that's it. Yeah, we go from an A+ to something much lower than an A+. This isn't really what an aggressive deck wants to be doing. White tends to be, a sort of aggressive deck. And a 1/4 is just not really going to fit in there. It has vigilance, which means that it can attack and still be around to block. But 1/4 is really kind of a blocking stat, unless it has unblockable, like Benthic Infiltrator does. So I'm not really a big fan of main decking this card. It's a totally fine and totally serviceable sideboard card. If you discover that you are not, in fact, the beatdown, then you can put this in and it'll probably save you some damage and buy you some turns to get to the later game. But I just don't think that it's going to be super main deckable. You can if you have to. You can if you're really, really hurting on creatures. But ultimately, I think this is just going to be more cuttable than it is not cuttable. So I've got to go with a C- on Afa Protector. Next up, we have Allied Reinforcements. This is 3 and a white for a sorcery at uncommon, and it says put 2/2/2 white knight allied creature tokens onto the battlefield. What is going on with this card? 2/2 night tokens have vigilance. They always have vigilance. I have no idea why these two don't have vigilance. My guess is that they figured, well, they're allies, so that'll make up for them not having vigilance, but I don't like that. 2/2 night tokens are always supposed to have vigilance. But it's still 4 mana for 2/2/2s, which seems totally fine. It's not at instant speed, but that's still totally okay. Being allies, you might get a double rally trigger off of it, maybe double Calastria healer trigger or something like that. Obviously, double strike doesn't help, or double lifelink doesn't help, but any of the ally triggers where doubling them up does help is totally serviceable by this. It gives you cohort fodder. We'll talk about cohort in just a little bit. Seems like a totally fine sort of mid-pack pickup. I don't think you'd first pick it. I don't think you'd open a pack and go, oh, wow, Allied Reinforcements, I'm going in on that. But if you're already going down that route, if you're already sort of in white, I think it's a totally fine mid-pack pickup. So C+ for me. I think you'll play this more often than you'll not play it. Next up, we have Call the Gatewatch. Call the Gatewatch. 2 white for a sorcery at rare. Search your library for a Planeswalker card. Reveal it and put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. Oath of the Gatewatch is all about Planeswalkers. It's all about Super Friends. There's a number of cards that care about Planeswalkers. That is bad, bad, bad news for us limited players, because that means there's going to be a lot of useless cards. This card is worthless. It's terrible. How often have you opened and played with a Planeswalker in Limited? I can probably count the number of times on one hand in the past 2 years, maybe 2. Yeah, let's go with 2 hand. Maybe 6 Planeswalkers I've opened in 2 years of weekly drafting online and in paper. You are not going to open a Planeswalker and open a Call of the Gatewatch and totally want to play Call of the Gatewatch. I would want something like 3 or 4 Planeswalkers before I consider playing this card, and that is just an absolute impossibility in Limited. So unfortunately, this card is garbage. I kind of need a rating lower than F-. You should not play this card. It should be the last pick in every single pack. Just totally worthless. Thankfully, some of the other Planeswalker focused cards that we'll see later on are at least a little bit playable because they do some other stuff. But this one is just stone unplayable. Even if you open and get a Planeswalker, you still should not play this. This would be so much better in your deck if it was a bear, if it was a 2/2 for 2, if it was anything other than this card. So don't play this card. Don't take this card. It should be last pick, F-. Next up, we have Dazzling Reflection. This is 1 and a white for an instant at common. You gain life equal to target creature's power. The next time that creature would deal damage this turn, prevent that damage. And we almost had my first mistake of the set, because I had rated it and commented on this card thinking that it was prevent damage that would be dealt to the creature this turn. Now, it does work out the same way, sort of, as I thought it would. Basically, you're going to get attacked by your opponent, you're going to block their creature, and you're going to cast Dazzling Reflection on that creature. You're going to gain some life, and that creature is not going to deal some damage. Hopefully, your creature then maybe kills it and lives through it. Now, unfortunately, this is not God's willing. This is not Feat of Resistance. We have had some really nice white creature saving tricks in the past, and this one doesn't really feel quite up to snuff on it. There's no boost. It doesn't make your creature any bigger. Your creature already needed to be able to trade with your opponent's creature. With Feat of Resistance, for example, your opponent could have attacked in thinking you wouldn't get a trade, thinking you would just have a chump blocker, and suddenly you have not only a trade, you have your creature living. With Dazzling Reflection, your opponent has to already be willing to trade their creature, meaning they don't really care about their creature, or they have a trick of their own. So I'm not a huge fan of Dazzling Reflection. I think ultimately you're going to cut this more often than not. The life gain just doesn't feel that good to me. Yeah, we've had so many better options in the past that I just don't think this is a card that I really want to play. So I've got to go with a C- on it. I think you could play it if you were really desperate for playables, but I'm not going to look to start this, at least to begin with. Next up, we have Expedition Raptor. This is a 3 white creature bird at common. It's a 2/2. It's got flying, and it says when Expedition Raptor enters the battlefield, support 2. Support is a new mechanic in Oath of the Gatewatch. Support means that you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X other, very important, target creatures. So support 2 means that you can put a +1/+1 counter on up to 2 other creatures. Now, very unfortunately, that means that if you cast this on an empty board, you're getting absolutely no value out of it. And that's going to be one thing that I'm going to come back to an awful lot on support, is my worry about the consistency of getting full value. Because a lot of the cards are costed in such a way that if you aren't getting full value, you are paying an arm and a leg for that creature. And this is a good example. This, on an empty board, is a 5-mana 2/2 flyer. I don't know if I'd even be willing to play that, meaning that this is basically a dead card if you don't have a full board, or at least 2 other creatures on the board. Now, of course, if you're in that situation, you may just have to play it, in which case you are crippling yourself paying 5 mana for just a 2/2. If you can get full value out of this, you're virtually getting a 4/4 for 5, 2 of which is flying and 2 of which is spread across 2 other creatures, which seems okay, seems fine enough, but I just don't know about support, and you're going to hear this time and time again whenever we come up with a support creature. Yeah, I'm so hesitant to play a card that is miserable in a number of situations, especially when that situation is requiring me to have a pretty sizable board. Because if I have a pretty sizable board already, why am I not just winning the game? Now, obviously, there are board stalls, but I don't like playing cards that are only good in a board stall. So I'm really hesitant about support in general. There are some decent rare ones and some ones that are less disgustingly costed, but of course, they're not going to be a common like Expedition Raptor is. So ultimately, I think this is just sort of fine and probably barely includable. I'm going to go with a C on it. I kind of want to drop it to a C-, but I'll start a little bit more optimistic than that and go with a C. But I think you should feel totally free to cut this, and you really shouldn't be going out of your way to get it. Next up, we have General Tawdry. General Tawdry is a 4 white legendary creature human ally at Mythic, and she's a 3/4. When General Tawdry enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an ally creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. And she has an ability: pay white, blue, black, red, green. Ally creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of colors among those creatures. This is not a good limited card. This is obviously made for EDH, because having that Wooburg ability means that this has 5-color identity. You can play this as a 5-color general in your commander deck. In limited, this just isn't going to work. We know Converge didn't work in Battle for Zendikar. There's not nearly enough support to make it work here, especially when, 2/3 of our Converge cards are disappearing. So I just don't think you're ever going to activate this ability. You're not going to play 5-color allies. It's not going to happen. So ultimately, this is a 3/4 for 5 that finds you an ally card from your deck, probably your best ally card. Which hopefully is a pretty darn good one, because I'm paying 5 mana for a 3/4. So I just don't know about General Tawdry. You'll probably pick her depending on what her value ends up being, which could be sizable, especially a foil one, I would imagine, for Commander. But ultimately, I don't think that this is going to be all that good for a limited matchup if you're playing competitively or playing to win. I think it would be an okay pickup once you already kind of know you're going towards the allied deck. You could obviously take this to try to go into the allied deck, but that's assuming that you're going to get the allies that you really want to get. If anybody else is taking the better allies, you're just going to end up with this really mediocre one. So I'm going to go with a C+ on it. I think it's okay, and it's totally fine if you are in the allied deck, but don't get sort of fooled into trying to go 5-color allies just for this ability, because I think you will be very, very, very disappointed with the results. Probably leave this to Commander, but C+ for General Tawdry. Next up, we have Immolating Glare. This is 1 and a white for an instant at uncommon. Destroy target attacking creature. Now this I like. This is pretty standard white removal. We've seen destroy target attacking creature before. I feel like it almost was 2 and a white. But maybe that was attacking or blocking creature with Divine Verdict. It is conditional, of course, but you are going to be attacked. And if you are getting attacked, that's probably the situation where you most want removal. And it is going to be something that you don't really want to have attacking you. So for a measly 1 white to blow up basically anything that isn't indestructible or hexproof is really, really, really good. This is super solid, and I think you should probably try to get as many of these as you can. Maybe even first pickable, but I'd probably prefer not to first pick it, but a really high pick, second, third, fourth pick for sure. I've got to go with a B+ on this. This is just the removal that white loves to have, so B+. Next up is Iona's Blessing. Iona's Blessing is a 3 and a white enchantment aura at uncommon. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has vigilance and can block an additional creature. Big whoop. I don't really care for it. Auras, as we all know, need to be really good. They need to be really, really, really good, because you're wasting a card and mana on pumping up a creature that maybe just gets flickered or bounced or removed or somehow really cheaply destroyed for all of the work that you put into it. A 4-mana aura that gives +2/+2 in vigilance. That's just not that exciting. I've talked time and time again about how Vigilance is a nice ability to have, but you don't want to go out of your way to get it. +2/+2 from an aura is fine, but again, not really that exciting at all. And blocking an additional creature, I don't think I have ever really seen that to be relevant in a limited match ever. Yeah, there's corner cases where it becomes relevant, and we've had creatures that have this ability before, but ultimately, it's so rarely relevant that I'm not going to waste a card slot and 4 mana on an aura just to get that ability with +2/+2 in vigilance. I'll pass this every time. I don't ever want to play this card, so it's got to get a straight up F from me. Next up, we have Isolation Zone. This is a 2 white enchantment at common. When Isolation Zone enters the battlefield, exile target creature or enchantment an opponent controls until Isolation Zone leaves the battlefield. This is Oblivion Ring. We know and love Oblivion Ring. Oblivion Ring, however, is 2 and a white. This is 2 white. Do we want to play an extra white for Oblivion Ring? Yes. Yes, we do. I will play Oblivion Ring for 4 mana any day of the week. We just don't get Oblivion Ring all that commonly. We have had Banishing Light recently. But yeah, this is just a totally fine card. You're going to want these. You're going to want to play these. The fact that it can hit enchantments maybe has a little bit of a bonus, but you're really going to use this as creature removal. I'm going to cry a little bit inside every time that I have to play this for 2 white instead of 2 and a white, but I'm going to be totally fine with this. I'll take this pretty aggressively. I'll take this pretty highly. I'm really happy to see it at common. That means that white is going to have some common removal. And I've got to go with a solid B on it. If it was Oblivion Ring, 2 and a white, it would be even higher than that. But Isolation Zone, pretty happy to see it. Solid B. Next up, we have Coresight Meister. This is 2 and a white for a creature core soldier ally at common. It's a 3/1, and Coresight Meister has first strike as long as it's attacking. Well, 3/1s were made to attack, so having first strike just on the attack makes sense and seems fine to me. Obviously, first strike all the time would have been better, because then this could have been an amazing blocker as well, but we can't ask for that much at common and 3 mana. I'm pretty sure that I'm always going to be happy to play this. I'm pretty sure that I would be happy to have a couple of these. This is going to put me down a really aggressive white ally sort of path right from the get-go. Very happy to see this. 3/1 first strike while attacking just seems awesome, so I've got to go with a C+ on this. It's not a bomb. It's not going to win you the game. It's not really B territory. It's not potential first strike territory at all, but it's a total include. You're going to include this way more often than you cut it. I'm not sure if you ever would cut it. Next up, we have Core Skyclimber. Core Skyclimber is 2 and a white for a creature core soldier ally at common. It's a 3/2, and it has an ability, pay 1 and a white, Core Skyclimber gains flying until end of turn. This is really similar to Leaping Master in Khans of Tarkir, which was 1 and a red for a 2/1, and you paid 2 and a white to give that flying. So this is 1 mana more expensive for an extra power and toughness, and the ability is cheaper. That means that I like Core Skyclimber even more. Having a 3/2 for 3 is fine anyways. We already pay that here and there. It doesn't quite pass the vanilla test, but it's still totally fine. And being able to pay a measly 2 mana to make this fly and get in the air for 3 just seems awesome. I'm pretty sure I'll always be very happy to play these. Just like the Scythe Master, I will take them kind of mid-pack or so when I know that I'm in white and there's not too much else white going on. And I'll probably even play these in multiple, because 2 mana isn't that big of an investment. Paying 4 to get 2 of these in the air is totally fine for me. I'll pay 4 to do 6 damage in the air any day of the week. I'm very happy with Core Skyclimber. I played Leaping Master a number of times and was decently happy with it, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to play Core Skyclimber even a little bit more than that. Again, like Scythe Master, it's not a bomb, it's not crazy, it's not first pickable, but I think it's always includable, so C+ for me. All right, let's leave the commons and get back to a mythic. We've got Lindvall the Preserver. Lindvall is a 4 white legendary creature, angel, for a 5/5 at Mythic, as I said. Lindvall has flying, and when Lindvall the Preserver enters the battlefield, if an opponent has more life than you, you gain 5 life. There's another paragraph. When Lindvall enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more creatures than you, put a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield. 3/3 angel is a bit weird. Angels are usually 4/4s, but that would probably be a more expensive card. So a 5/5 flyer for 6 is decent right there. That's a game ender, that's a curve topper, that's totally fine. Potentially being an 8/8 flyer for 6 spread across 2 bodies, super good. Your opponent may as well just give up right then and there. Now, if your opponent has more creatures than you, that might mean that you're behind, and this will just sort of stabilize you and potentially turn the game right around. But of course, being Battle for Zendikar block, those extra creatures could just be scions, of course. They could just be little piddly things, in which case you are going to dominate the field when this comes down. Gaining 5 life if you're trailing, that's cool. That's fine. I'll take it, even if I don't care too much about it. But it would be, nice against a really aggressive allies deck or any sort of other aggressive deck that might exist. But the stats on this thing are just fantastic. 5/5 flyer for 6, I would play as a curve topper, even if it was vanilla. I wouldn't be excited about it if it was vanilla, but I would be fine with it. The fact that it could potentially be an 8/8, and of course you can hold this back. You can even, sack a creature, throw it in for a trump block or something to make sure that you're going to get that extra angel, and I think this just makes an absolute game ender here. I'm really happy to see Lindvall, and I would be very happy to just sort of windmill pick right away. I've got to go with a solid A+ on this. Next up, we have Make a Stand. Make a Stand is 2 and a white for an instant at uncommon. And it says, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. There's been worse combat tricks, but there's been better. This one's a bit more defensive and reactionary than I would generally prefer for white. I usually play white decks very aggressively. They want to be, little creatures getting in there, being aggressive. So I think this probably becomes a little bit more of a sideboard card against a board wipe or, a Planar Outburst or Radiant Flames or Kozilek's Return or something that's going to wipe your board is where I think this really comes into play. And you don't really want to main deck a spell that just protects against that. It does give +1/+0, so maybe you could use it to finish off if you had a really wide board, if you're attacking with 5 creatures and somehow they're all getting through. That's an extra 5 damage. But if you have 5 creatures that are getting through unblocked, you should just win the game another turn, and this would be better as something else. But definitely keep this card in mind. If you feel your opponent's making a really weird attack, count their mana. If they have 3 mana up and they're playing white, they may have a make a stand and you may get blown out by it. I think that'll probably happen very commonly at the start of the format, so just be aware of this. I think ultimately you can include it if you want to, and you can cut it if you want to. I'll probably lean towards cutting it a bit more often, but let's start it off with a C. Next up, we have McKinley Aeronaut. McKinley Aeronaut is a 1 and a white creature core scout ally. It's a 1/3, and it's got flying. And that's about it. So I was off on Mist Intruder. I gave Mist Intruder an F, and I think that was a bit too low, as I said in my top 10 Thursday yesterday. But this is not Mist Intruder. It doesn't have Ingest. It doesn't have any other ability on it. This is, in fact, exactly the same card as Territorial Rock, which we saw in Dragons of Tarkir, and that didn't see very much play. It was kind of a good sideboard option. When you weren't the beatdown and you needed something to sort of stave off, or maybe you needed a flying blocker, you would side in Territorial Rock, and I think McKinley Aeronaut is going to be the same thing. It is an ally, so there is that slight extra bit of relevance if you are in the ally deck, but I don't think it's something you really want to go out of your way. If you are hyper relevant, or if allies are hyper relevant to you, then maybe you want to include this, but that would only happen if you didn't have better ones. I think really you want to have this sitting in your sideboard and using it when you need to kind of slow down your opponent a little bit when you're not actually the beatdown. So I'm going to go with C-. I think it's more cuttable than it is playable, but keep it in mind in your sideboard. Next up, we have a very common reprint. We have Mighty Leap, which is 1 and a white at common for an instant that says target creature gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. I'm certain I've talked about Mighty Leap before. Maybe it was in Origins or somewhere. It was definitely in Modern Masters too. Maybe I haven't done Mighty Leap in a set review. But anyways, Mighty Leap is fine. We've seen it time and time before. If you have a spot for a combat trick, put it in. If you don't bother trying to squeeze this in. And also always be aware of someone who has 2 mana up and is attacking with a creature that seems like it's just gonna die. Be very careful. They may have Mighty Leap. I'm not a huge fan of combat tricks that just do a little pump. Eminently more playable in sealed, of course, because you're not going to have the pure level of cards that you do in a draft. But if you need it, you need it. If you don't, you don't. Don't go out of your way. And if it makes its way into your deck, don't feel bad, but don't go out of your way. So straight up middle of the road C. Next up, we have Mundos Vanguard. Mundos Vanguard is a 4 and a white creature core knight ally at rare. It's a 3/3. And it has Cohort, a new ability. So Cohort is sort of an identifier word for this ability that covers a whole bunch of creatures. And Cohort is the ability to tap the creature that has Cohort and tap an untapped ally you control to get an effect. So Mundos Vanguard says tap and tap an untapped ally you control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So you can tap Mundos Vanguard and another ally that's untapped, keep that in mind, no shenanigans there, to give everything you have a +1/+1 counter. This could get out of control really fast. It really depends on the quality of the Oath ally deck. The ally decks that existed in Battle were, of course, fantastic. Unfortunately, we're only getting a single pack of Battle in our drafts now. So it's really going to require allies to be a solid deck in Oath of the Gatewatch. That's going to remain to be seen. It looks like there are decent allies, though. Now, if you first pick this, you should be able to determine your colors, hopefully red-white, maybe black-white, who knows, and really go to town on the Battle for Zendikar pack, picking up every single relevant ally that's in there and make an amazing ally deck. At that point, Cohort is going to be the best thing around. You're always going to have allies kicking around. You're going to be able to activate this regularly, and your board is just going to get out of control. Now, Cohort, I'm slightly hesitant on, but way less hesitant than I am on support, because, of course, all you need is one other ally, and if you are in an ally deck, you absolutely should have that unless you built your deck very poorly. So I think Cohort's going to be relatively easy to activate. Just make sure that you do draft properly around it. And I think this is one of the better Cohort abilities out there. Just flooding your board with +1/+1 counters is going to be fantastic, especially especially because Mundos Vanguard gets the counters as well. I would be super happy to first pick Mundos Vanguard. I would be super happy to go down the allies route because of this card. So I've got to go with A- on Mundos Vanguard. Next up, we have another Planeswalker Matters card, and unfortunately this one's part of a 5-card cycle. We have Oath of Gideon, 2 and a white for a legendary enchantment at rare, and it says when Oath of Gideon enters the battlefield, put 2 1/1 white core ally creature tokens onto the battlefield. That's the limited part of this spell. That's the part that you could actually maybe play. The second half of this spell says each planeswalker you control enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on it. That is flavor text in limited. That does not matter. Ignore that. So I don't really care about this card. It's 2 and a white for 2 1/1s on the ground. It's not at instant speed. It's not anything awesome. They're just allies, so at best you get a pair of rally triggers, and there are going to be so many fewer rally triggers out there. You know, you're not going to have a deck that has 3 or 4 Calastria healers in them. You're going to be lucky to have 1 Calastria healer in a deck. So multiple rally triggers just isn't going to be a huge thing in this draft format. So I don't even really care that I'm getting 2 allies. Now, they give me cohort fodder, and I guess that's okay, but I feel like there's so many allies that I could just draft that are better than a pair of 1/1s that I just don't really care about this card. I don't want to take this card. I don't want to play this card. I feel like this card should be pretty last pick. I'm totally out on Oath of Gideon for limited. Just straight up F- for me. Next up, we have Undue War Cleric. This is a 1 and a white creature human cleric ally at common. It's a 2/2, and it has cohort. Tap an untapped ally you control. You gain 2 life. Well, this is a far cry from Mundos Vanguard. Mundos Vanguard's cohort mechanic was quite nice. This one is really middling. Tapping down 2 entire creatures just to gain 2 life, I don't really care about that. I'll do it if it's the only option, if I'm not going to be punished for it, if I happen to have this creature and an ally untapped at the end of my opponent's turn or something like that. But other than that, I just do not care. Now, it is a bear. It's a 2/2 for 2, so it's totally and utterly fine at a minimum, and it does have a slight upside some of the time. So, you know, you don't have to feel at all bad about playing this card, but you really shouldn't go out of your way to get this. I just don't super care about this card. Yeah, it has a place in the black-white life gain allies deck, but you know, Stonehaven Medic wasn't exactly an all-star of that deck. It did some things here and there were some cute interactions. And this I just don't think is going to be much better than that. So C+ at best, and probably a little bit less than that. Probably just a C, probably on par with a normal bear, I think. Next up, we have Relief Captain. Relief Captain is a 2 white creature core knight ally at uncommon. It's a 3/2, and when Relief Captain enters the battlefield, support 3. So, you know, everything that I've said about support stands here as well. I don't know how much you want to rely on support because you're going to have to rely on having a large board, and that's not always going to be the case. Now, here, it's a little bit better, I think, than Expedition Raptor. 2 white for a 3/2 is only ever so slightly overcosted. It's overcosted by like 1 mana, although it is a colored mana. But support 3 does seem pretty good if you can get full value. If you can get full value out of this, you're getting a 6/5 for 4, which is insanely good. So I think Relief Captain is actually pretty darn decent. And boy, do I want to combine this with Eldrazi Displacer. Can you imagine paying 3 every turn, or even 6 a couple of times to support 3 every time? Yeah, I think this is a totally fine support creature. I'd be pretty happy to play this, and I think I would take this relatively highly because I would be okay playing this for only part of the value. I wouldn't be terribly okay playing this for no value, no extra value, but even partial value, I think, makes this fine, and if you do get full value, then boy, this is really good. So I'm pretty happy with Relief Captain. I'll go with a B- on it. I could push this down to a C+, but I think I'm okay with enough with it to put it at a B-. Next up, we have Searing Light. Searing Light is an instant at 1 white mana, so just a single white mana, at common, and it says destroy target attacking or blocking creature with power 2 or less. That's not great. I don't generally care about creatures that have power 2 or less. That's really low, like really, really low. I don't really care about creatures who are attacking me with that low of power. I would prefer to have, you know, a 2/2 of my own, or a 3/3 that just kills the 2-power creature, or at least, kind of bounces off of it. I feel like this is ultimately sideboard tech against flyers. This is kind of the, there's flyers coming at me and I don't have flyers of my own. Well, this will kill a lot of the flyers until we get into the more bomby ones. Maybe against a Benthic Infiltrator, but I think ultimately you do leave this until in your sideboard until you see a reason to use it. It's a decent enough tempo play early on, but if you draw this or you have this kind of after turn 3, I think you're just going to be sad about it. So I think it is ultimately more a sideboard card than anything. So I'm going to go with a D+ on it. I think you could maybe side it in. We'll have to see what kind of the average power of creatures is in the format, but I'm going to go a little bit low and start on a D+ with this one. Next up, we have Shoulder to Shoulder. Shoulder to Shoulder is a 2 and a white sorcery at common, and it says support 2, draw a card. So this, I think, is a real test of support. Would you play a card that does nothing but support? And I don't know about that. So at its worst, this is 2 and a white at sorcery speed, I might point out. That's kind of sad, to draw a card. That's the worst, and I would never touch that card. This could be 2 and a white to put a counter on a creature and draw a card. I don't think I'd ever want to play that. At best, this is put 2 counters on a creature, or sorry, 2 creatures, and draw a card, which I still don't think I really care about that either. If this was instant, I would definitely be a little bit more considerate of it. I would think about putting it in a little bit more, but sorcery speed pump spell, not that great to me, even though it does replace itself. I think this is going to be kind of like a 24th card, a card that you just don't really play all that often. You're going to cut this, or you should cut it, I think, way more than you should play it. So I'm going to go with a C- on it. Just not a big fan of Shoulder to Shoulder. Next up, we have Spawnbinder Mage. This is 3 and a white for a creature human wizard ally at common. She's a 2/4, and she has Cohort, tap an untapped ally you control to tap target creature. So this is, like the Cleric, a totally normally costed card. It's a 2/4 for 4, which is what we usually see knights having. A lot of creature knights, not token knights, are 2/4s for 4, which is quite fine. And it blocks a ton of things. It blocks, almost everything that's going to hit the board before like turn 5 or so. And keeping this thing up on defense and another ally, and then tapping them to tap a blocker or an attacker on your opponent's turn seems pretty darn good. And then you can try to get through with whatever you have on your side. But still, this has to be one of the more expensive tappers we've had in a while. Back in the day, to tap something, you just tapped the tapper. And then we started paying mana. We started paying 1 mana or 2 mana. I think we at one point had to pay 3 mana for a tapper. Now we have to tap 2 entire creatures to tap another creature. That's not the best, but this is still totally fine costed. It's totally fine to be played as a vanilla creature, and the ability is just a decent little bit of value if you can pull it off. So I've got to go with a C+ on it, but not too much higher. Next up, we have Step Glider. Step Glider is a 4 and a white creature elemental at uncommon. It's a 2/4. It has flying and vigilance. And for 1 and a white, target creature with a +1/+1 counter on it gains flying and vigilance until end of turn. I don't know. If there's a support deck or a deck that really is heavily focused on getting +1/+1 counters onto everything, then I think maybe this gets a little bit better. But a 2/4 flyer with vigilance for 5 is asking a little bit much, if you ask me. I think if you're not heavy on the counters, you don't really want to bother this. Even if you are heavy on the counters, I don't know if you still want this. I mean, 1 and a white to give something that you've boosted up to a 3/3 or a 4/4 or a 5/5 flying and vigilance would actually be pretty good for 2 mana. So I think in that deck it does gain a little bit of value, but I think outside of that deck, I just don't know if I want to be playing this. So I'm going to go with a C on it, but I feel like some decks that's going to be lower, and some decks it's going to be a little bit higher. But for now, Step Glider, it's going to get a C. Next up, we have Stonehaven Outfitter. Stonehaven Outfitter is a 1 and a white creature core artificer ally at rare. It's a 2/2, and it says equipped creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever an equipped creature you control dies, draw a card. So there is an equipment sub-theme sort of in the set, although I think it's really just because cores are about equipment, and equipment was kind of a thing in the original Zendikar. It really doesn't seem to be supported in this set. There's a decent equipment, maybe a couple of decent equipments at rare, but generally the equipment that are in Oath of the Gatewatch and the ones that we know of in Battle for Zendikar just aren't playable. And the fact that it would maybe give an equipped creature +1/+1 and I'd get a card when it dies doesn't make me want to waste a card slot on those miserable, crappy equipment. So Stonehaven Outfitter just feels totally out of place. Feels like it's meant more for Constructed or for Commander or for Cube or something like that, where you could build an equipment sub-theme with good equipment that people would actually want to play. But in Draft, I think this is literally just a bear. I think it is just a 2/2 for 2, and the abilities are not going to matter. Because, of course, if you're loading up on equipment in your deck, that means you're not loading up on creatures. You're not loading up on removal. There are these piddly little equipment cards that are taking up valuable slots in your deck. So I just don't care about this card. Play it if you have a bear. If you need a 2/2 for 2, it's there. But don't waste a pick on this. Take this really, really late just as a filler white card. I see no point in going into the equipment deck in this set. So straight up C, because it's a 2/2 for 2 and nothing else. Next up, we have Stoneforge Acolyte. This is a single white mana for a creature core artificer ally at uncommon. It's a 1/2 and it's got cohort. Tap an untapped ally you control. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. You know what I just said? I'm going to say it again. The equipment that is okay and slightly playable is rare. The commons, the uncommons, the few that exist in battle are just not worth playing, and not worth playing a 1 mana 1/2 and having to have another ally and having to tap them just to dig for them to hopefully get it and throw some other stuff on the bottom of my library. The equipment deck is a trap. I'm pretty sure of it. Give it a shot. If you wanna go deep on equipment, let me know how it goes. But I'm pretty certain it's going to be a bad time for everybody involved. Well, no, it's going to be a good time for your opponent. But this is not even playable, so I've got to go with an F on it. At least Stonehaven Outfitter was a 2/2 for 2. This is a 1/2 for 1. Just solid F. I don't want to play this card. I don't want to take this card. And that brings us to the last card in white. For Oath of the Gatewatch, we have Wall of Resurgence. Wall of Resurgence is a 2 and a white creature wall at uncommon for an 0/6. It has Defender, of course, because it's a wall. 0/6 for 3. We just had an 0/6 for 2. Why do we want to play an 0/6 for 3? Well, there's more text. When Wall of Resurgence enters the battlefield, you may put 3 +1/+1 counters on target land you control. If you do, that land becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste that's still a land. This card has Awaken. This card has Awaken 3. For 3 mana, you are getting an 0/6 Defender wall, and you are awakening 3 a land. That's insane. You're getting a 3/9 for 3 mana. That's unheard of. That is absolutely unheard of. I am so impressed with this card. You're getting an incredible defensive creature. We know how good Fortified Rampart was at holding the ground, especially in a blue-white Flyers deck, and boy, do I think there might be more support for a blue-white Flyers deck in this format. And this is just huge. You get an 0/6 wall, plus you get a 3/3 that you can attack with. Maybe the most hyper-aggressive of decks wouldn't play this card, but even they get a 3/3. And they get to stop some damage coming through if their opponent happens to be trying to match them in the race. But I think basically every white deck is going to be very happy to play this card. Every single white deck is going to be happy with it. So I'm going to be pretty high on this card, which is strange for a wall, but you know, it is a 3/9 that we're getting for 3. So I'm going to go with a solid B- on this. I won't go any higher because it is a wall. It is a defender. It's not a bomb. It's not going to win you the game in any way, shape, or form. But I think it is just really, really, really solid. So I've got to go with a B- on it, and I'm pretty happy to see it in packs, I think. But that's going to wrap it up for white. It's kind of nice to do a small set, or I guess this is technically a medium set now. I did 3 large sets in a row, so this video is a little bit shorter than most of them have been, which I'm sure will be a boon to some people. I know there have been complaints about the length, but hey, I like to go over every single card. I don't like to just ignore cards and say, oh, they're bad and you should know why they're bad. I like to make sure that people understand why cards are bad or understand my reasoning behind them. But I'm really excited to play white. I think white does have some pretty decent aggressive options. I think there are some good ally options. I think there's some really good uses of cohort. Not sold on the support mechanic just yet. And boy, do I want to play with Eldrazi Displacer. I want to open that card so bad. I hope so much that it's in my pre-release pool and that I get to just abuse that thing like crazy. Definitely let me know what you think of white in the format. Do you agree with my ratings? Do you disagree? Let me know. What's your most look forward to white card? What do you want to see in your pre-release pool? Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at the Mana Leek. That's Leek, like the vegetable, not the card. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/themanaleek. You've already found me here on YouTube. You've got the comment section down below. Please make use of that. As I said, please be civil people as well. As well, if you like my videos, you should like and subscribe to them. There's that little thumbs up icon for a reason, and there's the subscribe button below each video and in the outro of each video. Making sure that you subscribe will let you know the second the blue set review video goes up tomorrow, and the black the next day, and the red and the green and the colorless and the multicolored and all the videos that pop up here and or there. As many of you know, set review and set release weekends are big on the Mana Leek. I will have behind-the-shoulder drafts from the very first FNM of Oath of the Gatewatch. I will have pre-release recaps. I will have box openings. I will have a crack-a-pack the week after pre-release before the set is even available, where we can talk about what we would take, pack one, pick one. You want to make sure you know when those videos come up, so make sure that you do hit that subscribe button. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all next time.